My name is Michaela Zimmerman. First of all, I would like to thank you for attending this lecture recital and for those who are tuning into the live stream. I also want to preface this saying I apologize if we have notifications going off on the computer. Every time I turn those notifications off, I lose the sound, so I apologize if that happens. Therefore, I will begin this lecture recital by presenting a lecture over several interesting aspects of the Pathetique Sonata. Then I will conclude tonight's activities by performing the sonata. Before beginning this lecture, I would like to present the roadmap I will be following during this time. First, I would like to provide a brief introduction, then a brief biography of Ludwig van Beethoven. Then I would also like to bring your attention to European events going on during the writing and publication of the Pathetique Sonata, as well as what was going on in the music world and the circumstances in which the sonata was composed. I would also like to address two works that may have been a source of inspiration to Beethoven as he composed the sonata, as well as how his contemporaries received this piece. Then I would like to direct your attention to how this monumental piece has been used in modern music. Then I would like to give a brief overview of sonata and rondo form, followed by an analysis and overview of the sonata. In the analysis, I will briefly state the themes and important elements found in all three movements, as well as interesting things that occur within the movements themselves. Ludwig van Beethoven composed 32 piano sonatas from 1795 to 1822. In 1798, at the age of 27, he wrote his piano sonata number 8 in C minor, also known as the Sonata Pathetique. It was published in the following year in 1799. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany in 1770. He was born to a musical family. His father and grandfather were court musicians. Beethoven was a gifted pianist and violist. After following in his father's and grandfather's footsteps, serving as a court musician for 9 years in Bonn, he moved to Vienna, Austria, to study with Joseph Haydn and remained in Vienna for the rest of his life. In Vienna, Beethoven became well known both as a virtuoso pianist and a composer. He became the first composer to earn a successful living while not being employed by the church or the court. He was rooted in the traditions of Haydn and Mozart, composition-wise. However, his composing also embraced the new spirit of humanism expressed in the works of German Romantic writers and the ideas of the French Revolution. Beethoven began to have difficulty hearing in 1795. He began to go deaf in 1798, in which year he wrote the Pathetique Sonata, and by 1819 he was completely deaf. For the last 15 years of his life, Beethoven was unrivaled as the world's most famous composer. In musical form, he widened the scope of the sonata, symphony, concerto, and string quartet. Amongst his most significant achievements was to raise instrumental music, which was considered inferior to vocal, to the highest plane of art. Beethoven's compositional works are divided into 3 different time periods. Each period corresponds chronologically with his life, and each period also features distinct musical qualities that set it apart from his other compositional periods. The early period, which was from years 1770 to 1802, he mastered the musical language and genres of his time. The works of Mozart, Haydn, and other contemporaries strongly influenced Beethoven during the early period. It is during this period that Beethoven wrote the Pathetique Sonata. The middle period was from years 1802 to 1816, in which he asserts his individualism in the music he composes. The late period was from years 1816 to 1827, in which his music became more introspective. I would like to focus on the early period, as this was the period in which the sonata was written. In the early period, notable works by Beethoven were the following: a set of piano trios published in 1795, six string quartets published in 1801, his first two symphonies, his two romances for violin and orchestra, and his only ballet called The Creatures of Prometheus. For piano during this early period, he wrote 20 piano sonatas, a set of 6 variations in F major, and 15 variations and a fugue on an original theme for piano. Among the famous sonatas written during this period is, of course, Sonata number 8, the Pathetique, Sonata number 14, the Moonlight, and Sonata number 15, the Pastoral, which would later influence the 6th symphony of the middle period, also known as Pastoral. Then he wrote 3 piano concertos. As an aside, there are a couple of things that make the Pathetique Sonata unique. First is that this sonata utilizes similar thematic material, spanning across multiple movements, which allowed Beethoven to create a more unified sounding composition. For example, Beethoven's second theme in the first movement sounds very similar to the theme at the beginning of the third movement. I would like to demonstrate that for you. So we have the second theme of the first movement. And then we have the beginning of the third movement. This sonata also provides a notable early example of Beethoven's experimentation with the dramatic potential of the key of C minor. Beethoven's works in the key of C minor are said to be powerful and emotive, which evokes dark and stormy sentiments. During the classical era, C minor was used infrequently, and always for works of a particularly turbulent cast. The key is said to represent for Beethoven a stormy and heroic tonality, which he uses for works of unusual intensity, and it is reserved for his most dramatic music. Charles Rosen, an American pianist and writer on music, said this regarding C minor in Beethoven. Beethoven in C minor has come to symbolize his artistic character. In every case, it reveals Beethoven as a hero. C minor does not show Beethoven at his most subtle, but it does give to us in his most extrovert form, where he seems to be the most impatient of any compromise. In 1892, George Grove, the founding editor of Grove's Dictionary of Music and Musicians, wrote the following regarding the key of C minor in Beethoven. The key of C minor occupies a peculiar position in Beethoven's compositions. The pieces for which he has employed it are, with very few exceptions, remarkable for their beauty and importance. A few of the notable pieces written by Beethoven in the key of C minor are shown on this slide. Some of the most notable ones are, of course, the Piano Sonata, Opus 13, number 8, Pathetique, his Piano Concerto, Opus 37, number 3, the 32 variations in C minor for piano, the 5th Symphony, and his last Piano Sonata, Opus 111, number 32. Transitioning to European events that were going on during the writing and publication of the Pathetique, there was a great deal going on. Europe in 1798 and in 1799 was in the midst of the French Revolutionary Wars. In 1798, Napoleon invaded Egypt and Switzerland. Then in 1799, Napoleon invaded Syria. The Second Coalition, which included Britain, Austria, Russia, the Ottoman Empire, Portugal, Naples, and various German monarchies formed together to fight against Napoleon, and they prepared campaigns against Napoleon in Italy, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. In 1799, the French Revolution comes to an end. The platypus, the element beryllium, and the Rosetta Stone, which helped to decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, were discovered in these years. Thomas Beddoes makes the first recorded use of the word biology in its modern sense. Lagrange, as well as Carl Friedrich Gauss, published works in mathematics. Paolo Ruffini partially proves the Abel-Ruffini theorem that quintic or higher order equations cannot be solved by a general formula. In the music world, the first edition of Nimsteck's biography of Mozart was published. Haydn completes the Creation, Missa in Augustus, and the string quartets, Opus 77. Beethoven, in addition to publishing the Pathetique, published his piano sonatas number 9 and 10. And on January 28, 1798, Christian Gottlieb Neffi, composer and conductor, died. He was the principal piano teacher of Beethoven during Beethoven's years at Bonn. Beethoven wrote the Pathetique when he began to go deaf in 1798 at the age of 27. The sonata was dedicated to his patron at the time, Prince Karl von Lichnowsky. The prince and Beethoven were good friends until Beethoven ruptured the relationship in 1806. The sonata was written and published during the classical music era. Beethoven, in his early sonatas, of which this sonata is classified in, was influenced by the traditional styles of Haydn and Mozart. However, there are elements in the sonata that are innovations that start to break away from the classical norms of compositions for sonata form. First off, the first movement begins with the introductory grave, before proceeding into the energetic allegro in cut time. Beethoven returns to the grave section twice during the course of this movement, first at the beginning of the development section, and then again before the coda. Haydn is credited to inventing this compositional process. However, Beethoven extended it. Like most minor key sonata forms, Beethoven modulates to the relative major key of E-flat major for the second theme of the first movement. However, he unusually uses some mode mixture, touching upon the key of E-flat minor, thus expanding the tonal boundaries of the sonata form. Secondly, the finale's main theme closely resembles the second theme of the first movement, which I've already demonstrated. It also contains a modified form of the second movement's main theme, thus connecting the movement with the previous two. As a technique, this is another of Beethoven's innovations, and a technique he would return to and further develop in his later works. An example of this would be his piano sonata, Opus 57, number 23, also known as the Appassionata, in which there is an extensive unitive cohesion between all of the movements. There are two theories of where the title of this sonata originated. Some held that Beethoven himself entitled the piece. However, a majority believe that it was his publisher, Eder of Vienna, who titled the work Grand Sonata Pathetique. A quote given by his publisher regarding the sonata is the following: "His is that nothing so powerful and so full of tragic passion had hitherto been dreamt of in pianoforte music." When one sees the word pathetique, most listeners probably think that the word is related to pathetic, which means arousing pity, especially through vulnerability or sadness or miserably inadequate or very low standard. However, this meaning is far from what the word meant in the time the sonata was written. Where does the word pathetique come from, and what does it mean? It originates from the word pathetikos, to the Latin word patheticus, to the French word pathétique in the 16th century, which means stirring, affecting, impassioned, or more simply, moving. When used in this context regarding this sonata, it is a good descriptive word of the sonata's emotional role. Two works that musicologists believe that the Pathetique may have been inspired are Mozart's Piano Sonata K457 and Bach's Partita No. 2 in C minor. First, regarding Mozart's Piano Sonata K457. Both sonatas are in C minor. The second movement, Adagio Cantabile, uses a theme that is remarkably similar to the one in the second movement in Mozart's sonata. Regarding Bach's Partita No. 2 in C minor, both works open with a declamatory fanfare with a marking of grave, of which both share a distinct combination of dotted rhythms, melodic contour, and texture. The first four notes of the partitas Andante, G, C, D, and E flat, prominently are repeated throughout the work, are found in the Pathetique as the first notes of important themes. For example, first in the hand-crossing second subject of the first movement, which is initially transposed, and then in the main theme of the rondo of movement 3. Beethoven was quite familiar with the works of Bach, studying the well-tempered clavier as a youth, and returning to his predecessor's compositional styles later in life. The Sonata Pathetique was a very significant success for Beethoven. It sold well and helped create his reputation as a composer, and not just as an extremely gifted pianist. It was instantly popular upon its publication. The sonata would expose the world to the styles that Beethoven would continue to develop in the years to come. There are several uses of the sonata in modern music. For example, the Cantabile theme from the second movement was used as the theme music for the radio program Adventures in Good Music, which aired nationally in the United States and in many other countries from 1970 to 2007. Several rock songs have also utilized the Cantabile theme. Kiss used the main theme as the basis for the song Great Expectations in 1976, and in 2003 in Kiss Symphony Alive 4. Billy Joel used this as the melody for his chorus of his 1983 song This Night from the album An Innocent Man. L.V. Beethoven is credited on the album sleeve as co-writing the chorus with Joel. Joel sings the melody that the right hand plays in Beethoven's music, while the band plays Beethoven's harmonic progression and accompaniment. The main harmony and melody remain dominant features of the chorus. So that was Kiss. I apologize for that. It's not correctly linked. Rebecca Spencer used the Cantabile from the second movement in a song entitled Still, 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 Pathetique. Cantabile is also used in the Piano Guy song You Say. It is also used in Midnight Blue by Eric Robertson. Wolf Hoffman uses the introduction, first and second themes from the first movement in a work entitled Pathetique. The Trans-Siberian Orchestra in Mephistopheles' Return utilizes the first theme from the first movement in both sung lyrics and in instrumental interludes from the rock opera Beethoven's Last Night. There are many other examples that utilize this sonata, which has been featured in movie soundtracks as well as made into numerous arrangements for other instruments. So a brief overview of sonata and sonata rondo form. Introductions are optional, but are not unusual for sonata form. The exposition is the first part in sonata form. It is where the themes and motives are set forth directly. You have a first theme or principal theme or theme one. It can consist of a single theme or a group of motives or themes. Then you have theme two, and theme two in the exposition is usually in the dominant key of the current sonata. So for example, in Pathetique, we're in the key of C minor, so we expect it to be in G minor, G major. The transition is followed by, theme two is usually in the dominant in the key for the piece if it's a major mode, or the relative major if the key for the movement is in the minor mode. Then the development comes after the exposition. That is where the previously presented material is worked out. By Beethoven's time, the development became very important, and it was, he stretched the limits of the development sections quite often. Then after the development comes the recapitulation, and the recapitulation is simply a restatement of the exposition. It can be an exact copy of the exposition, but notably in this case, there is no change of key for theme two, so theme two will be heard in the tonic key. Then you have a coda, which is optional, and then the end. The sonata rondo form was an important form in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. It is often seen in the music of Mozart and Beethoven. Sonata rondo form incorporates major features of sonata form, such as contrasting themes, a similar tonal scheme, and the use of transitions and retransitions that can be rather elaborate and with distinct musical materials. The sonata rondo form is commonly used in the final movements of sonatas as well as symphonies. It is arched in design with the typical design of A, B, A, C, A, B, A, with C being the development. The middle section of a sonata rondo can feature the development of the rondo theme or previous episodes, or can be episodic and consist of primarily new thematic material. So, moving to the Pathetique. This sonata is the first sonata that Beethoven wrote that utilizes an introduction. The first measure phrase is the foundation upon which the whole of the introduction is written. It is very modulatory in character and ends on the chord of the dominant minor ninth. I would like to play a little bit of that for you. So after the introduction matter, you have theme one, which is this. Then you have theme two, which is in E flat major. And then what follows closes out that part, the exposition. And then we have the development, of course. And the development will reinstate the grave introductory material, and then it prepares you for the recapitulation, in which theme one is stated, then theme two, and we have ending material, and the movement is brought to its conclusion. The second movement is in a 5-part rondo form. So we have the A-B-A-C-A design. So section B section is in F minor. Then A comes back, and then C, which is the developmental section of this movement, comes back in A flat minor. And then we have A again, and then a codetta, which ends the second movement. So that brings us to the third movement. This movement is in sonata rondo form, or 7-part rondo. So we have the A section. Then we have the B section, which is in E flat major. Then we have A again. Then we have C, which is the developmental section. So earlier I stated that this section sounds a lot like the second movement, introductory. Remember that theme was this. Now we have it in the third movement. Then it repeats back to A. Then we have the B coming back again, and then we have A, and then we have the end. In conclusion, again, I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. Before I perform the sonata, I would like to share a few words about the emotional qualities of the sonata. Please keep in mind that in 1798, the year that he wrote the sonata, Beethoven was starting to go deaf. For a musician, that's bad news. So he's coming to accept his impending deafness. So this sonata is written in C minor. It is a very dark sonata, very emotional, and things of that nature. Now this is before the middle period. In the middle period, he composed the Symphony No. 5, which has a beautiful fourth movement, the finale, which goes to a heroic, victorious C major resolution. So at that time, he came to accept his deafness, and thankfully he continued to share his music with us so that we could enjoy it throughout history. But during the first early period, he was having problems accepting it, even to the point to where he was considering whether to commit suicide or not. So, unlike the Symphony No. 5, the Pathetique, both in the first and third movement, ends in a minor tone. So, he hasn't quite accepted it. But in the movements themselves, I'd like you to listen to moments of hope, of light, of deep longing, and basically every emotion that can possibly be felt. And it's very turbulent. So thank you very much.